Hey everyone, I'm Szczepanek. Welcome to Pianist Academy for another one of our favorite days, Livestream Wednesday. Welcome to so many of you who are tuned in already. Bedlington Groomer, hello. Noteworthy, Becky. Antonio, welcome. Whitney, welcome. C Drive, that's right. And I didn't actually realize that it's Chopin competition prelims day, opening day. Very cool. I'm going to have to check that out. Rob, welcome. Nancy, welcome. And Celiana, great to see you. I have actually never said your first name out loud. We've been friends on Facebook for a long time. I hope I pronounced it correctly. And oh yes, the sheet music you were asking about. Yes, there was a link to my web store to get the sheet music down below this video. At least I just put it up right before we went live. So if it's not there, you might have to refresh. But don't do that now. Stick with me. David, welcome. June, welcome. Let's see. Johan, welcome. And Brad, Rhodesy, great to see you. Whitney, that's a great question. Whitney, you ask, will I be doing a Masterclass type video for the Ave Maria? I wasn't planning on it, but if you would like to see one, I can probably do that. Z-Spark, welcome. And WS Jade, great to see you as well. And Catherine, hello, everybody. Well, wonderful. Okay, let's jump in. And I have to first off apologize to Antonio, who is graciously back again, because he asked me a question for the previous live stream 2 weeks ago that I completely forgot about. He emailed it to me ahead of time, and I never talked about it. We went 2.5 hours. And so we're going to start today by talking about that question from Antonio, and then we're going to jump into hearing Rhodesy play some of Chopin's Minute Waltz. Oh, Nancy, you say you upgraded your digital. Very nice. A Roland FP60X. Very nice. How are you enjoying that, Nancy? And Jose, welcome. Greetings from Spain. Yes, greetings. And Enrique, you say thanks for explaining the favor wrist circle. I'm glad to be of help, Enrique. Okay, first off, Antonio, correct me if I am missing anything about your question that you sent in 2 weeks ago. But Antonio was asking about MIDI. Does everybody know what MIDI is? Those of you who play digitals, I hope you know what MIDI is. MIDI, M-I-D-I. Just, yeah, give me a few. You know what? If anybody, especially if you don't know what MIDI is, say so, because even if, let's say, half of you do and half of you don't, it's worth a 5-minute explanation about a little bit of what it is. Rhodesy, you say you use MIDI to help you learn new pieces. And Nancy, you're going to learn about MIDI. Enrique, the fact that some people don't know what MIDI is makes you feel so old. Jose, you gave the actual what the acronym it stands for: musical instrument digital interface. Beautiful. Noteworthy said digital interface. Bedlington Groomer, not a clue about MIDI. Bedlington Groomer, I know that you play on a clavinova, so you're going to find this helpful. Okay, MIDI as... Who wrote it in? Jose. MIDI, as Jose said, literally stands for musical instrument digital interface. It is a data stream. Usually it runs through a cable of some kind from a digital keyboard to a computer. It can also just be on your computer itself. But it is a... By the way, let me know. I'm happy to write some of this down and put it on screen if you'd like that. So if this is getting to be too much, just type it in the comments, and I can write some notes for you as well. But let's see. For piano playing in particular, MIDI amounts to a couple data points that translate into playing your keyboard on a computer. Even if you just play your keyboard standalone, it probably uses MIDI to trigger the sounds. So when we have a MIDI signal, we get a data point when a note is depressed. There's data for how long the note is depressed. And then there is a data point when the note is released. Okay, now multiply that by however many you want to play. There are data points for the pedal being used. We'll leave it at that. It's a little more complicated, but we'll leave it at that. And there are data points for how hard. Bedlington Groomer, you say yes on notes. Okay, I'll write a couple notes down. So let me pull up some blank paper. There's also data for how hard a note is played, pressed, depressed, struck. That's called velocity in MIDI. Let's see here. Okay. Don't mind the staff paper. It's just the only blank stuff I have. So MIDI, that's what we're talking about. So usually you'll see it in all caps, but... Okay, data. MIDI is, just think of it as data that translates into what we hear from a keyboard. So we have on and off data. We have velocity, which is how hard we strike a pitch. Velocity goes from, in MIDI data, from 1 to 127. I don't exactly know how they came up with that number, but MIDI was, I think, initially invented in, I think, the late 1980s. If someone actually knows the date, correct me if I'm wrong about that, but it's been around for a bit. Let's see, Z-Spark, you said it's a standard for putting musical data as digital. Yeah, pretty much. And hello, Kale. Wonderful to see you. Let's see, what else am I missing? Pedal data isn't just on-off in MIDI. For some pedals it is, but it also has the possibility of 127 points across which the pedal can be measured. MIDI data is also very similar to those of you who know about Disclavier and Yamaha. I think that's right. Disclavier, I think I spelled that right. But Disclavier, I believe, has 1,027 data points for capturing velocity and pedal movement. Let me see. I think that's the crux of it for what MIDI is. Now, MIDI gets interpreted in our computer to either be things like your sheet music. So if you write sheet music, I know Rhodesy, you use MuseScore. So if people use MuseScore, if you used Finale in the past, or Dorico, or Sibelius to notate music, or any other program, it probably uses MIDI to do so. What you get when you play back a score, for example, on any of those platforms is a MIDI reproduction of it. Usually, for a long time, MIDI was kind of correlated with a very robotic computer sound, because it's true, if you just have a computer interpret notes on a page, you're going to get something that's pretty rough. Oh, and Jose, thank you. Jose, you say velocity 0 does exist, and you're absolutely right. So it's actually 128 data points. Thanks for clarifying that, Jose. That is correct. A 0 velocity in a good sample library or VST should equal... Oh, that would have been like a 1. It should equal... When you depress a key, but actually get no sound. Okay, great. So in a good sample library and with a good pianist, you can create some pretty darn realistic and human, very lifelike performances just using this data. What sample libraries do is take the few bits of data that we get and they turn it into something really amazing with a lot of programming. We're not going to go into all that, but I think this is a good introduction for what MIDI is. If any of you play a digital instrument, Clavinova, Roland, and you want to hook it up to your computer and you want to use sounds or pianos that aren't on board your keyboard, you have the world is your oyster. There are so many choices that are incredible sounding and will elevate, gosh, even a beginner starter level keyboard to incredible heights. Okay, now Antonio's question. Antonio asked, would it be possible, Antonio, just fill in the blanks here for me. Is it possible for us to hear, for example, what makes Horowitz, and what makes long, and what makes, name a great pianist. How about Cortot? Is MIDI data enough for us to be able to hear and perceive all of those individual artists? Or is it not enough? Is it not enough? Do we not get enough data to hear all of the nuance in their playing that makes them that individual and that unique performer that they are? Those of you that have experienced MIDI, What do you think? So, I'm looking at Rhodesy in particular. What do you think? WS Jade, probably. What do you think? I know you've experienced MIDI in a variety of ways. Jose, obviously you know your way around MIDI. What do we think? Rhodesy, I don't know. Why would you say that? So Rhodesy says pianists that would be able to record MIDI would be long. Well, okay, sure. Cortot and Horowitz are dead. I get it now. So no, we couldn't actually get a MIDI reproduction of Horowitz, for example. We can't, because Horowitz wouldn't be able to play a MIDI keyboard. That's right. But let's say we had that. Let's say we turned a Rachmaninoff piano roll, for example, into MIDI data. Would we still be able to hear that it's Rachmaninoff? Jose, you say, yeah, original MIDI is from about 1980. MIDI 2.0, which is a big expansion, would be darn accurate. Mm-hmm. Whitney says it's pretty close, but I don't know if it can ever beat acoustic. I agree with that. It can be really amazing what you can do for really a tiny amount of money using MIDI. I mean, we're talking maybe like, if you want a really nice keyboard, a few $1,000s, and a really nice VST for a couple $100s, and you can do some really amazing stuff. But no, I agree. It's not, it won't, and I don't think it will ever beat truly playing on an acoustic. I think that's right. Antonio, you said you blame MIDI for you not sounding like you. That's good. Noteworthy, you said, is Spotify playing MIDI? Probably. Spotify is playing recordings back that people have released. Some of them are MIDI. Some of them that I've put out are MIDI. Actually, and this is going to lead into my answer to Antonio's question. Rhodesy, you say in a few years MIDI will be very close to a human performance. Let's flip that around, Rhodesy. And I'll clarify this for everybody. What if it is a human that performs the MIDI to begin with, and not the computer reading just the data points? Can we still hear the artistry with such limited data? Sam, I know, Sam, great question. I'll get to it, but I've got two things to cover first. I feel bad because I said that the last time you chimed in here with a question about Clair de Lune. But I promise I'll come back, Sam. Yes, Jose, you say you use the VSL pianos. They're pretty good. They're not my favorite, but they are pretty good. And the new Modern D from VI Labs that people here know that I love. Yes, that's quite good. C-Dive says MIDI wouldn't capture the room acoustics. No, but it would emulate them. Okay, I'm going to jump into my answer. And I'm going to kick this off by talking a little bit about an EP that I put out last year. It's the solo piano project EP of classical transcriptions. Puccini, Massenet, etc. Who else? Elgar was on there. A couple others. I can't think of them off the top of my head. I recorded the entire EP not on a acoustic instrument. I recorded it on my keyboard with a VST. And everyone, let me say one exception, because the person that actually could hear what I did had a very intimate understanding of the sound of the VST I used. But I recorded the whole thing on my keyboard, and no one, including when the album was played on classical radio around the United States, and I was interviewed about it, no one knew that I didn't play on a concert grand in a concert hall. It was a huge surprise because it was such a great replica of an instrument like that in a space like that. And it wasn't a computer playing the notes I wrote, it was actually me playing them. So Antonio, my answer to you is that yes, I do think we would be able to hear what makes each of those artists with MIDI data only. Because a tremendous amount, I'd say the vast majority of what they're doing with the music has to do with dynamic and rubato that they take that makes them the artists that they are. I mean, really summed up. There's, of course, a ton underneath that. But really summed up, I think that makes them the artists they are, and that would all translate via a MIDI stream. So yes, I do think you'd be able to tell the difference. That's not to say MIDI is perfect. It's not as good as an acoustic, and I think there are nuances that each of those artists would be able to do much more with on an acoustic instrument. But to your question, I do think we'd be able to hear what makes each of them unique when playing a digital keyboard. And that's MIDI 1.0, as Jose was talking about. Not even MIDI 2.0, which has far more data points that it captures. And I feel like both that story about being interviewed on radio and people having no idea that I didn't play an acoustic instrument, and also people telling me on my own recordings, it sounds like me when I play. They can hear my artistry. They hear what makes my interpretations mine as opposed to someone else's. And they hear that whether I'm playing an acoustic instrument or a keyboard. Interesting question, Antonio. Is there another part to that you want to chat about before we move on? Oh, Antonio, I didn't have a chance to watch the Maria Joao Pires interview that you emailed me yet. But I would love to. I think I started playing it and I had to jump on something else and I had to put it away. Let's see. So Z-Spark, you said question for later. Okay, we can try to come back to that, Z-Spark. That's about some logistics. And Noteworthy asked, okay, about one of my nocturnes. Well, people chime in if you know that piece of mine, my nocturne in C minor. B Booker. So you ask, so are MIDI sounds better than the onboard sounds on your Kawai? CA 901. That really depends. If it's just a really basic MIDI patch, the answer is no, absolutely not. But if it is a VST, like the Modern D from VI Labs, one of the VSTs from VSL, Vienna Symphony Library, I believe that stands for. Those are some of the big names. I have used in the past a lot the Garriton Abbey Road CFX, which was a Yamaha CFX Concert Grand sampled in the Abbey Road Studio 1, where a ton of major motion picture soundtracks have been recorded. Those are going to sound better and be more playable than onboard sounds on any digital, no matter how expensive they get. Even digitals that are in the hybrid range that are 5 figures USD to purchase. Yes, a VST that costs a couple $100 and runs off your computer is going to have a more nuanced tone. Jose, Noir is also great. You're listing all of my favorite libraries, Jose. I go so far as to say that many times... so here's another example. If I want to practice, let's say I've just had my piano here tuned, and I have a recording session that I need to practice for. And in the process of practicing, I don't want to knock the piano out of tune. I go to my digital and I play some beautiful concert grand in a hall via my computer, practice, do all the stuff I need to, and then come here and I feel usually very prepared, very warmed up, very prepared to play whatever I need to play here. We don't have to go into the details that MIDI doesn't have. It can't do everything, so there's still a lot of value. If you have an acoustic instrument, there's still great value. And maybe at some point MIDI will catch up. Maybe it'll be able to do that. I don't know. I think the last bits of nuance, I think, are still pretty far away from being able to be generated by a computer. And Jose, you say you have quite the collection of VSTs and a Kawai VPC-1 controller. Those are wonderful, fantastic. And you say that's all you need. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. Okay. I hope that was helpful to some of you talking about that stuff. Summing up again, I do think what makes an artist can be heard via MIDI as long as they play it. And it's not a computer listening to their recording and trying to regenerate it. That won't work. And as long as it's not a computer, I think it needs to be them on a digital instrument working their magic physically. Then it works. In all other cases, I'd say no. So WSJ, did you say... see, my arrangement of Oh Mio was acoustic, though, in the solo piano project. I did 2 versions of that one. And in fact, if you have good ears... So WSJ is talking about my arrangement of Puccini's Oh Mio Babbino Caro, which was a piece that was on the EP I mentioned earlier. And I also did a video playing this piano, but what came out on the EP was done with a VST. It was not done with an acoustic instrument. So I recorded them at 2 separate times. And there's a great comparison. You can take my playing of the exact same piece, played by the same performer with the same interpretation on an acoustic and on a digital instrument, and they're both available online. And if you have great ears, you can hear the one thing, 2 things that I think the digital missed that just couldn't be replicated. But it's limited to just 2 things, I think. Anyway, great conversation. Okay. Oh, yeah, WSJ. Yes, listen back to back. And for everybody else, if you want to continue this, Antonio in particular, since you asked about it, since both of those recordings are out, my version of Oh Mio Babbino Caro is on YouTube on this instrument, and on streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple, etc., will be on a digital. So you can listen to the same piece. You won't be able to see a video of it, of what I released on Spotify, etc. But you can compare both recordings. Okay, let's jump over to, before we get to the other questions that some people have chimed in with, except maybe, let's see. Let me answer Z Sparks' question and B Booker's that you just wrote in. Because Z Spark, you asked about, this is a very related question. So let me answer that, and then we're going to jump over to Rhodesy's playing. Then we'll come back to Sam with questions about Clair de Lune and some other stuff. So, okay, Z Spark, you say, what all do you need to set up a digital and play a good VST and record it for a YouTube video? You need a keyboard. Every keyboard, whether it has a MIDI port, as long as it has a MIDI port or a USB port, is going to transmit MIDI data. So you need a keyboard with one of those ports. You need a cable to plug it into your computer. You need a DAW, a digital audio workstation. One of the simplest ones is something like GarageBand on Apple. I believe Reaper, which is free for PC, I believe that one can supports doing MIDI recording. And of course, there are paid options like Logic Pro, Pro Tools, Cubase, others that are very, very good and they're professional tools. So you need a piece of software like that to capture the data. And then within that software, your DAW, you can open up any VST that you purchase. So anything from VSL, from VI Labs, from Garriton, from you name it. Native Instruments. Jose said some VSTs have standalone players. That is true. But you can't record the MIDI data. You can play them without a DAW via the standalone player, but you can't record the data and then sync it later with a video, for example. At least not in an easy way. Yeah, okay, thanks, Antonio. And C Drive. Yeah, piano. You say Piano Tech records MIDI too. I didn't know that. I don't use Piano Tech. So that's great. So any of those things, and then play, record, and what you export from any of those pieces of software, whether we're talking about Piano Tech or a DAW of some kind, what you're going to export is going to be an audio file. So it's going to generate a regular WAV file that Then you can drop into any video editor, sync with any video that you'd film anywhere. Yeah. Cool. There you go, Z-Spark. Okay, let me jump back into talking and looking at Rhodesy. So Rhodesy sent in a performance of Chopin's Minute Waltz, Opus 64, number 1. And this is a work in progress. So thanks, Rhodesy, for sending something in for some feedback as you're working on it and learning it. We're going to take a listen to Rhodesy's performance, and then we're going to chat about it and see what we need to work on. Let me get that queued up, and then we'll take a listen. Okay, let's give Rhodesy a round of applause for that. Drop some claps in the chat. Nice job, Rhodesy. And I was just going to ask you, so thank you for dropping that too. You said you've been working on this for 2 weeks. Great to know. Thanks for dropping that in. Okay. And Rhodesy, also just congratulations on sending in some playing, because a lot of times we hear your compositions, and we were just talking about MIDI, and they're usually played by a computer. And thank you for sending in some of your playing. I can't remember the last time we heard it. I know we heard you play some scales. I can't remember what else. Maybe it was Chopin Prelude? Possibly. But thank you for doing that. I think this is great. Yeah, okay. Rhodesy, let's talk about this we're going to divide it up kind of the way we usually do. We're going to talk about some technique things first, and then jump into some other musicality and artistry things second. First off, everybody can join in doing this. Try holding your fingers out straight. So I'm pointing them at the camera. Not relaxed, not clenched. Just hold them out straight. And try to wiggle your fingers as if you're trying to play the piano. So, like this. Is that easy or hard? I won't wait for an answer. You can type one in if you want to after you try it. Next up, take your hand and now curl your fingers. So this is, let's see. Like this. Curl your fingers. Now try the same thing. Easy or hard? Easier or harder than with the fingers out flat? I'll give you a second to try that. And lastly, shake your hand out and raise it up just with a relaxed hand shape. So a slight curve, not extended, not curled, just a natural curve of the fingers. And do the same thing. Wave your fingers around. Which one of those is the easiest? Which one of them is the hardest? Which one of them is the easiest? They should feel like three pretty strikingly different movements. Even though what we're doing, it amounts to the same thing. We're wiggling the fingers. You can't answer that last question. Anybody? Which one's the easiest? Which one's the hardest? Nancy said curled was the hardest for you. Okay. Whitney, first one was hardest. That was the one with the fingers outstretched. Last one was the easiest. C Drive says relaxed was the easiest. Curled was the hardest. Bedlington Groomer, the hardest is tightly curled. Some of the how you answer between the first two, the stretched and the tightly curled, will depend on how far you stretched the fingers versus how tightly curled you made them. So tightly curled or fully stretched. If you fully stretch the hand, I would argue that one's the hardest. If it doesn't have any kind of relaxation in the fingers, that's extremely hard to move the fingers around. You can even see as I do this how slowly the fingers are moving. My thumb sometimes isn't even doing anything. Tightly curled, I have a lot more mobility. But relaxed, I have a tremendous amount more mobility than either of the other two. Rhodesy, I bring this up because a lot of times, and I'm going to pull up a kind of a still shot of this, a lot of times, your right hand especially, we see you play with very flat fingers on the keyboard. Let me pull up a shot. Okay, this is what I'm going to show is a pretty good one. We're going to take a look at the right hand. Okay, your second and third fingers aren't being used. Your second, third, fourth fingers aren't being used right now with your thumb as you're holding that G. But look at how it fully extended 2, 3, and 4 are. I don't know what point in the piece this is happening. It's near the beginning. But likely you're probably playing that movement, because that's one of the only times our thumb is on a G. Right? And if we try playing that passage, approaching it with fingers fully extended like that, it's very difficult to play them quickly, and it's very difficult to play them with any sort of dynamic consistency or accuracy. So, Rhodesy, we got to work on keeping a little bit of a relaxed shape, so that as we're transitioning from pitch to pitch, going from thumb to second finger, that the hand is staying very relaxed, as opposed to, I'll show this both ways, this, where my fingers, even the ones that are used or not used, they're fully extended. That is very hard to control. It's going to cause for some, I'll call it messy legato, because like right there, I can't really release the fourth finger when the third is playing unless I do something with the wrist to compensate, which we don't want to do, right? Dynamically too, this feels like I'm kind of, don't take this the wrong way, Rhodesy, but it feels like I'm kind of slapping at the keys with the bottom of my finger, like this, instead of striking the key firmly with the tip of the finger. Yep. Rhodesy, you say, so that's why it was so difficult. You've been playing like that for 2 weeks straight. Yes, that's going to take some conscious, focused effort to change that. I would go, not a joke, Rhodesy, I would go this slowly. And you could play through with the left hand. Because at this speed, maybe slower if you need to, we're going to keep all of those fingers relaxed. We need to go slow enough that any finger that's not in use, in the act of playing, is totally relaxed. That's going to help us retain the relaxed hand shape, not over curled. Because if we try to introduce an arch or a curl shape, we're going to also introduce tension. And it's going to be the same tension that we get when we pull the fingers back. We don't want that either. Whether you said it was the hardest or the second hardest, that's not the goal. The goal is the relaxed one, because everybody agreed the relaxed shape is by far the easiest shape to play from, right? Okay, that was number one. Rhodesy, take your time, go really slow, really, really slowly. This might be more baked in your technique than you realize, because I'm pretty sure last time we saw you play, this was also happening. So if it is just a part of how you approach the piano, it's just going to take some time and effort, focused effort, to slowly change it. It's not going to change in a day or two of practice. But if you work at it in those slow increments, we will get it changed. And you will find all the stuff that you like to play. Rhodesy, I know you like to play some really advanced repertoire. You might feel like this is not as much of a challenge for you as some of like the Chopin etudes that you want to play. You were working on your first one, I believe. Maybe some of the preludes you've played. But we want to get that fixed. That's a really important component of playing the piano. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the left hand. When you're approaching some of these bass notes, and this might be easier if I show a similar view as what you had. Sometimes we see, by the way, I loved the camera angle. But sometimes we see, because I could see so much, that was great. Sometimes we see that your left hand it rotates a lot toward the bass note. And sometimes, like on these Fs, for example, the fifth finger might curl a little bit like this. And we're kind of playing from the side of the hand with rotation, but also curled. Throughout here, There can be some degree of rotation that we use, but it shouldn't be to the degree that you're going for it, which is like that, more like. As you speed up, you're not going to have time to do that much rotation to get back and forth. If you want to play, okay? There's very little rotation happening when we speed up. So we don't want to introduce that at the slow tempo because that's going to be something we have to unlearn later. The other thing is when you do play the outside of the left hand, fifth finger side, we don't want that curl, especially like we saw on F here. I'm trying to do the best I can to show that, but it looked kind of like this. Take a look at the shape of in the wrist, and then the bridge, and then what the finger's doing. And we have 1, 2, 3 places that are out of alignment with each other. So we want to change that to this position. Because the hand is somewhat in front of us to play this note in particular, there's going to maybe be a little bit of a break in the wrist, but all of the rest of this in alignment, right down to the fingertip. So not anything like that, or that, but straight down. Same thing with the our D flat. So as we play, we can move the arm to get to those notes and find that alignment. Right? But we don't want to go across and like this, or like that. That makes those low notes, gosh, really, really hard to land correctly and accurately. Making sense so far, Rhodesy? Okay. Okay. Next up, let's talk about pedaling. Good habit, even if this is in the beginning stages, or not the beginning stages, but middle stages of learning. Let's use some pedal that's a bit more in tune with the harmony and what the melody's doing. So, if you listen to many great recordings of the piece, you'll notice that the right hand through all of this stays pretty darn clean. Something like that. There's a touch of pedal in here. Where that touch of pedal happens is always on beat 1, because, I'll show the score. What Chopin wrote for pedaling, where the pedal comes down is good. Right at the beginning of the bar. So we're looking right there, right? Where Chopin writes the release of the pedal, in this case, is not great. Doubtful he played it exactly that way either. Because if we truly pedal through the end of the bar, there's a lot of blur happening there. And if you try to speed that up, that doesn't sound clean. It doesn't sound clean in the left hand, and it doesn't sound clean in the right hand. So what we need to do is condense the pedal so that it's not an entire bar, but it's more like we're using the pedal to just connect from the first pitch across the leap to the second. And maybe we don't use a very vertical release of the pedal, so you'd see maybe another sheet music a release that goes straight up. Maybe we don't want to do that. Maybe we want a more subtle release. That's a slower release, right? And then the pedal will stay up the whole rest of the bar. Then it comes back down, right? Across the jump in the left hand for every bar that we need one, and then a slower release. And if we do that, what we end up getting, especially as we speed up, right? That's much, much cleaner. It keeps the melody really clean. We still get the connection across the leap. So Rhodesy, what I'm doing right now is I'm just playing left hand. And get used to feeling where that pedal release is, and get used to hearing that the left hand is actually disconnected. That's okay. That's great. The right hand will be connected. Yes? So I'm trying to do what I showed on the paper there, on the page, which is that slow release after the second quarter note. So that when I play the third quarter note, there is no more pedal anymore. Okay. By the way, welcome Stace and Jeffrey. Awesome. Great question, Stace. We'll come back to that. Rhodesy, so practice the pedal with the left hand alone. So you get used to that. It'll also, especially later in the piece. Oh yeah, we'll jump there, Ray. We'll jump there. Let's see. Later we get what? This. Right notes. Close. Right? And if we're pedaling well, then we can also make sure that our left hand is actually holding these. I'll show it later because I do want to come back to this point, but these are all dotted half notes. Chopin, you know what? I'll show it now. Because Chopin's score shows no pedal through here. I think that's going to be too dry for the right hand. I don't think we should actually do a no pedal there. I think we should do a more conservative pedaling, just like we've done for the rest of the page. So, whatever the notes are on the next page. Yeah? So we'll keep the pedal working the same, even here. But the left hand needs to hold that pitch. We're going to come back to that for another reason, but hold, and then a slow release up toward beat 3. Okay. Great. Okay, one more technique thing, Rhodesy, and then we're going to talk a little bit about musicality. Be sure you're using good fingering choices, and be sure every time you play through, you use the same ones. There was one right at the end that was the most noticeable when you played it's just a D flat major scale that descends at the end of the piece. Yeah, something like that. There it is. I noticed, Rhodesy, you put your thumb on G flat, and then somehow got out of that position. That's a big no-no. In a D flat major scale, 2 is always on G flat. We cross to 3, then cross to 4. If we have the right fingering through there, and you've practiced your D flat scale, the last bar of the piece is really quite easy because it's just a scale. There isn't even a turnaround in it. There's no other ornamentation. So use your scale fingering. Yep. So Rhodesy, you say you thought you put thumb on C. You may have put thumb on C. You may, because if you're crossing from the thumb on fourth thumb on G flat to fourth finger, then your thumb goes on C. Yes, but that's not an ideal fingering choice. So Watch all of the fingers through there. And other places too. Make sure that as you're playing these phrases that... are we always ending that upward motion with fourth finger? When we come to the first turn or trill, what finger are you using? I'm looking at bar 7, 8, 9 into 10 right now. I wouldn't maybe follow the exact fingering given in this edition. The only change that I would make, instead of doing a 2-4-3 finger on the turn, I would probably play 2-4-2 because the figure ends. And then I have I can really execute that more quickly than 2-4-3. So depending on what you're using, okay, Rhodesy, you said 4 for the top one, great. Now, yeah, whether you use 3 here, 4 is another good choice. Depends on if you want to have to change fingers for the turn or not. But most important, make sure that you execute it the same way every time, over and over again. Same thing, coming in the next phrase. I think my preferred fingering is 4, 2, 4, 2, 1, and then 1 on D. 1, 3, 5, 2. I think that's what I like. Yes. Okay, so there's an example to get you started on that, Rhodesy. But yeah, most important, I saw some changes as you'd go through the same passages. Make sure that it doesn't change. Yeah. Hopefully you have a couple good fingering suggestions in the edition that you're working from too, just to be sure that you're using them. Rhodesy, while we're talking about that, are there any bars that you have any questions on about fingering? Because I'm happy to go through any of them in particular, if you'd like to. Okay, let's talk about more that we can do with the piece, other than just how we play. Chopin usually... Oh, Bedlington Groomer, thanks. Good to see you. Oh, Rhodesy, let me come back to your question. As you say, you use your thumb twice on F. And then 1, 2. That doesn't seem great, Rhodesy. Then 1, 2 for the turn with the thumb. And that's too many thumbs in a row. Too many thumbs in a row. Yeah, Rhodesy, that's the same spot we were just talking about. So let's go back to that. The only time we really should use thumb is here and here. F and D. All of the other pitches, no thumb. And then again, in the next line, thumb is only used on F and on D. Same 2 pitches. Because we can't get out of the thumb and we can't rotate fast enough to use thumb that often, that in a row. Okay? Yeah, Rhodesy, we'll come to the sostenuto section. Let's talk a little bit about musicality first, and then we'll come back to that. So, Chopin almost always, and especially the waltzes, but in quite a lot of his music, he gives us a lot of opportunities to say something. And he would definitely want us to never say the same thing twice, even though the score doesn't maybe show it any differently. He would not want us to play the first statement in the same way that we play the second statement of that. So the small change I just made was a change in how I'm going to pedal it. Later in the piece, maybe we have an opportunity to play it out a little bit more. Yeah? But try to challenge yourself to find how many different ways, every time a theme repeats, can it be different than what we heard before? Chopin would have loved that. Also, right at the beginning, we have that word, leggero. What does leggero mean? Rhodesy, an ad interrupted me. I thought I turned ads off. People, let me know if ads come up, because they're not supposed to on my streams. I don't want them to show up. So, okay. Yeah. Rhodesy. Anybody, what does leggero mean? Anybody? Rhodesy, you say great, light and free, playful. David's, you said lightly. Yes. June says delicate. Yeah, delicate. Okay, I can maybe get behind that a bit. Yes, the closest literal translation would be lightly. Freely, like Rhodesy that you said, free might be misinterpreted. It's not too free. It's light. Playful is scherzando. So let's not get leggero. Let's not make leggero scherzando also. And delicately that June said, I think delicately and lightly can go together pretty well. Although delicately has another emotional subtext that maybe we wouldn't play this piece. That is delicate, right? So that might be taking it a little bit too far with another connotation of that word. Lightly is the best way to go. And Rhodesy, as you play this, keep your right hand. Really, Chopin doesn't even give us a dynamic marking. Piano or pianissimo? Piano or pianissimo? All the time, Rhodesy. Keep it really, really light so that we're not digging in too much. That will also go a long way in helping correct some of the technique, but also in opening up some new colors for you to play with as you're looking at how can I take the same repetitions of these segments and how can I make them a bit different. At least if we start from a place that has that warmer but also more transparent tone color as opposed to that's a bit aggressive, and that's only really mezzo forte, crescendoing to forte at the top of the phrase. But that's too much. Yeah? And Rhodesy, I'm glad you brought that up. You say, except at the end where it says forte. And, okay, so we have forte here. So this is after the sostenuto section. We're coming back in. Right? And we have a forzando in the left hand and forte for both hands. So there's an accent plus a change in dynamic. With the crescendo marked, here's a great opportunity to, especially in this piece, the crescendo and the hairpins being two different things. Rhodesy, you probably already know this, right? Throughout this piece, the crescendo means crescendo. The hairpin is a rubato marking. And let's see further. We got pianissimo later. More rubato, and then forte at the very end. Now, everybody plays this end pretty pretty loudly. Whoops. I'm glad you brought up forte because yes, yes, we got there, Rhodesy. Remember what dynamic, I'll ask this as a question, what dynamic was Chopin a master of? And what dynamic, when he was performing and playing, and what dynamic did Chopin very rarely play? And anybody, if you know the answer, by the way, the answer, at least the answer that I am familiar with, comes from the book Chopin. I think it's As Seen by His Pupils. I'd have to look the title up again, but it's a book of writings from other people that were associated with Chopin about their experiences with him. Nathaniel, wonderful answer, Nathaniel. Rhodesy, you were close. Stace says the opposite of Rachmaninoff. That's very good. Okay, yes. Nathaniel said Chopin played shades of piano. That is absolutely true. And most of his playing didn't get above mezzo piano, especially later in life. And fortes were never really loud. They were never accented heavily. They were never big and bombastic. I mean, you could think of the ballades, for example. Like, there are such showy pieces, and they have so much power the way we hear them today. Chopin probably didn't play them that way. Yes, not only do you rarely see a triple F in his score, but when we see forte, it's going to be very different than when we see forte from Beethoven and when we see forte from Rachmaninoff, like was mentioned. From those composers, forte is pretty darn strong. Especially Rachmaninoff, forte is going to be really laying into the keys. With Chopin, forte should be a really cushioned and blooming, stronger dynamic. But it should never get harsh, and it should never be overly loud. So this goes back to the Leggiero marking at the beginning, like we talked about. If we're playing most of this piece in shades of piano, like Nathaniel mentioned, then let's jump to the next page, where after the sostenuto section, so we have finished. Whoops. Oh yeah. Let me play that again for you. We're on the top of the page. So here, still somewhat quiet. That, I think, is a pretty good forte and a warm accent in 77 that I gave you. So the crescendo is gentle. And that dynamic then should still be the biggest we've heard, probably throughout all of the pages we've played so far. It is the biggest statement, but it is not a Beethovenian forte, like that, and it's not a Rachmaninoff forte. Right? A Chopin forte is much less. So be careful with those. Yeah? Great. Okay, let me see. A couple more quick things that will take some time, I would say, to work through, but I just want to mention them quickly. Always listen for where the line is going, right? Don't get caught up in the notes themselves. But we have this. And I know you're showing some shape, but can we think about really, think about exaggerating where, for example, the scale I just played. Really make that as singing and musical as you possibly can. Even though this piece got nicknamed the Minute Waltz, one, it doesn't happen in a minute. Two, there are many performers that play this piece highly successfully in a slow-ish tempo, like... with a lot of inflection and a lot of shades in there. And that, I think, can be really nice, and that's something that we should aim for. It doesn't have to be we don't have to be a speed demon. It doesn't have to be a race to get to the end of the piece. No one can play it in a minute. Even the fastest performances don't come close to getting finished with the piece in a minute. So don't strive for speed. Strive to show inflection in every micro phrase. So Chopin wrote lots of really long phrase markings in here. Just to give you an example, in this section, this is all under one marking. Whoops, and still under one marking. Let me turn the page. Still under one marking. That whole thing is all marked under one phrase. But there are lots of micro phrases within that, and there are lots of places where we can show extra changes in color and extra points of inflection. So every 2 bars, we have one harmony, right? Then something different. It is linked, but it's different. And then, what is all of that? And then here. So think about all of those different shapes, and they're available for us so many places. And then when you take the repeat, don't play the same phrases. Play something different. Whitney, I will try to come back to that question, yes. Okay, let's see. Rhodesy, you had a question in particular about the middle section, so let's talk about that. And that'll be our last bit for this piece, and then we'll move on to some questions from everybody. You said memory in particular about the sostenuto that you're having trouble with. So Rhodesy, do you know the chord progression? I would ask that first. Do you know the chord progression? And can you even say it out loud as you play the chords we're going through? Secondly, with the left hand only, can you play the left hand with your eyes closed? I'm not going to be able to do that on camera. I haven't practiced the piece. So, but that would be a great thing to work on. Can you play left hand? Can we feel the jumps and the different shapes in the right hand? And not for the entire section, but maybe start with 4 bars at a time. So start with 4 and 4. And then group them all into 8. So, but first you do 1, 2, 3, 4. Just play that. Work on that, on the memory for that. And then work on that separately, just left hand. Then you can start to add the right hand in if you want to. Right? And Rhodesy, because you're a composer also, I bet you can do this. Make sure that you're always singing in your mind the right hand part. What is the melody doing? Right? Do you know the skips? Do you know what they sound like? If you had to, for example, play the piece by ear, if I'm not looking at it, this. That was close. That's the general gist. Yeah? But I played that. I have not practiced the piece before today, so there was no muscle memory. I was playing it by ear. Because you're a composer, Rhodesy, you can also work on that too. Can you play the melody by ear without the score in front of you? Again, small chunks. So, and learn what the shape is. And then while you're doing that, really watch carefully the fingers you're using to connect everything and get to know the feel of the gesture you're making. I keep playing 43 wrong, but that's okay. Hello, Webster. Greetings. Okay, in Rhodesy, you say mostly now between the recap, say part two with the grace notes and the chromatic notes, and okay, your mind goes blank when we start to get toward the second half. Okay. The main melody is exactly the same. There isn't that group of 4 against 3 in the right hand. That's written out more in time the second time through. But our main melody is the same. Since much of this is played with the thumb, here's another challenge. Can you play through the melody, just the melody only, without looking at the score? Maybe give yourself a time or two to work it, but leave the grace notes out and play. This is all with the thumb. And then third finger, write your fingers in if you need them. Dum dum, thumb, thumb 3, thumb 3 2 1 3 2. Maybe not 3 2. I'd probably bounce. Yeah, 3 2 1 1. But now, only looking, forgetting that the achacaturas are there. Just thumb, 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 thumb 3, 3 1 3 1 3 2 1 3 2. Can we do that from memory? And of course, show a good phrase too. Made more difficult by the fact that we only get one finger. Yeah. Yeah, Rhodesy, you forget the left hand probably because the right hand is distracted. And you're having to think too much about the right hand. The left hand is pretty easy. It's the right hand that has the bigger challenge in making a phrase with mostly the thumb and then finding those grace notes. See, Webster, you say 1 2 at the end. Webster, if you're talking about getting into the last bar of the page here, we can't use 1 2 because we can't reach the octave with 2 5. The octave has to be with 1. And if you're talking about, no, it's not a single note. Yeah, we've got that. So. And I wouldn't play 2 here. I wouldn't play it twice because if any place that we're going to show a break in the slur, it should be between the thumbs or between the last note of the bar and the first note of the next. So we wouldn't want to use 2 twice because that'll potentially break the slur in the middle of that bar. Yeah. Good. Thanks, Webster, though, for the thoughts on that. So, Rhodesy, the focus that we're taking right here is working on parts of the piece and memorizing parts of it. For example, what we just talked about, right hand alone. Right hand, can you play with the fingers needed? thumb, 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 3. Can you play that whole melody, and do you know that? Can you play that with your eyes closed? Can you navigate the jumps without looking? Next, can you play that without the grace notes with the left hand? And if that is too hard, if it's too hard across 4 bars, take 1 or 2 bars at a time. Yeah. It seemed like as you were playing it that there was a lot of thought about what was coming next, and you managed to find all the right notes. I always find it surprising when a student can do that, because it means intellectually and maybe orally you know the piece really well. Those are the components that are usually missing. Those are the ones I'm usually encouraging people to work on more. But you knew those really well, which allowed you to, given enough time, you could find your way through it. But the part that was missing was actually the muscle memory to carry you from one gesture to the next gesture and beyond. And in order to build that, I'd say go back to watch the score a couple times, but play very short segments and work on memorizing 2 bars or 4 bars at a time. Don't try to just sit down and say, I'm going to play the whole thing from memory. That's not going to work. By the time you get 4 bars in, what you've learned from the first 2 is going to be gone. So when you come to this point, gosh, maybe even, that's 2 bars plus a downbeat. If I were working on memory, I'd work that. And I'd work just those 2 bars plus a downbeat until I can absolutely, very assuredly play all of that without a ton of extra thought, where my hands know where to go. And it's a short enough thing, we can get in some repetitions of it, and we can build the muscle memory that's missing. That muscle memory then can work with the other things you already understand. The ear training that you've done with the piece and knowing where it goes. And probably, if you were playing with how slow you were playing it, you probably have a good idea of what the harmony was. Otherwise, you may not have been able to find it. Unless you were reading it off the score. I did see the pages in front of you. So if you shifted from playing the first part of the piece memorized and then to reading this, well, in that case, we still might need to work on all 3. I couldn't tell. Yes, Webster, absolutely. Yes, whether you use what Webster just said was like naming chords like A flat, augmented, D flat, second inversion. That can help. Yeah. That much detail, I find that going into that much harmonic detail sometimes gets in the way of seeing the bigger picture shape. It's not a bad thing. I would just be picky about where you use that much detail. So what I prefer to do, instead of naming harmony, and especially if it's a more complex chromatic harmony, instead of naming that and trying to remember that for different bars in the middle of a piece, I'll use that if I have a really significant problem. Like if the memory just fails and it fails and it fails and I can't learn it another way, I'll use that. But first, I will try putting in some smaller and maybe easier to remember landmarks. For example, instead of thinking... Instead of thinking about A flat, like in these first 2 bars, that one and that one, the first bar, we'll say, probably doesn't need a placeholder. We're going to play that fine. It's the second bar, remembering that it's the same chord in a different inversion. We can talk about that. But I might think, instead of A flat in root position, A flat 7 in root position, I might think it's the same chord I just played, expanded. So that, in my mind, gets summed up to one word. Expand. D flat, expand. And so now I have groups of 2, especially bars like these where the harmony is so similar. So I'm not thinking A flat 7 in first inversion, A flat 7 in root position, but with a different chunk on top, and then D flat open, D flat second inversion, etc. That's a lot of information. So it's just for me. Expand, D flat, expand. And then muscle memory takes care of the rest. But Webster, for what you brought up, I definitely have used that technique in really, really big pieces, especially maybe a big sonata where the themes might be presented in many different keys. And I need to remember what key I'm in, and I need to remember that when I'm playing one particular part of the piece that I'm not going to somehow accidentally modulate and play a cadence in the wrong key or something like that. Then I will use some of those really precise harmonic definitions. So those are valuable, I think. Yeah, Webster, I think we basically said the same thing with your last comment. So you're talking about performing, Rock 3. Yeah. I mean, it depends. I think there are places for that. But on the flip side, Webster, and this is speaking at a really advanced level. So Rhodesy, we're about wrapped up talking about this piece. At a really advanced level, thinking too much about the harmony, having to think too much about the harmony, pulls us out of expressing ourselves at the instrument. And so if our mind is full of, I need to go from this chord to this chord to this chord, and I'm following maybe even note in the melody or in Rock 3, goodness gracious, there's so many notes that we'd have to follow. And if our brains are too interrupted with that sort of thought process and that information, it pulls us as the performer out of the performance, and it pulls us into it's just a less emotive state, where instead of expressing the gesture of the music, maybe Rock 3 has one gesture that spans an entire page in the score, and it's one cadenza-like figure, maybe longer than a page, but we still want to be in touch with what we're supposed to be expressing. Yeah. And so that's why I reserve those moments for places where, let's say I've learned from, mock performances or mock recordings, doing them myself. I've learned that if I don't really have it, I hope that in some future performance, I will have it, and it'll be so in the pocket and just right that I won't even need to reference the theory anymore. I hope I can just feel it and play it. But for those little moments where I need it, yes, I agree. They're great to have because they can be the difference between having a complete train wreck on stage and absolutely having a successful performance. The way that I like to test myself in that regard is to do mental practice away from the instrument and play the piece without being at the instrument. Visualize playing every note everywhere. And most of that is driven by visual memory and muscle memory of what I need to do, and a little bit of oral memory. And rarely, if I have to think about the theory when I'm doing a mental run-through of a piece, I probably don't know it well enough. I don't know the other 3 ways well enough to be solid on stage, and it's going to cause me to pull back in a performance possibly, and it's going to cause me to second guess where I'm going. And even if I get through it, that might open up a whole can of worms. So I think we can agree, Webster, that it's important to have that depth of knowledge. It's important to be able to find it in any piece, in any phrase, any bar, and use it when we want to. And if you or anybody like to use it a bit more often, great. I'd say as long as it doesn't pull you out of being emotive with your playing. And then we have those points, those landmark points that we can reference. Yeah. Okay, Rhodesy, Great stuff. I appreciate you sending that in. I hope many of you were here for that whole segment. We can give Rhodesy another hand. You're doing great work, Rhodesy. Keep it up. And we'd love to hear you play this in its entirety. You know, maybe in another 2 weeks or 4 weeks when you have it a bit more put together. That'd be great. Cynthia, that is a great question. I'll answer that quickly. And then I know, Sam, are you still here, Sam? And if you are, please drop something in the chat because we'll go back over your Debussy question that you left an hour ago. And then we will come back around to other questions. So Cynthia, you ask, how would you get started with mental practice as a beginner? Is it helpful at that stage? That's a great question. I do think, how quickly we can use mental practice changes with experience as a pianist. Thanks, Rhodesy. And yes, Webster, I agree with that. Yeah. So Cynthia, yeah, the way we use mental practice can change. If you're very, very experienced, and like what Webster and I were kind of just talking about, you can do mental practice before you even play a note of a piece of music. And earlier in learning, earlier in our experience at the instrument, we're going to need some points of reference to base our mental practice on. Because really, as we become more advanced, that's all we're using. We're using a huge amount of information that we've gathered from years, maybe decades of playing to inform how we think about something that we've never played before. That makes it possible. So for a beginner, let's say you're working on something, you know, in a method book. I don't know. Maybe I know maybe it's level 2 or level 3 Alfred. I think it might not even be A flat. We get some of that Brahms in a reduced arrangement. Once you've learned a piece like that, or you're well on your way, like we know pretty well, we know the chords that we're playing, we know, right, this is A major in root position, there's our 5-chord E7 in the inversion that's typically given in a method book like that. Then we can take that information that we know intellectually and that we know by feel and that we know by looking at our hands too, hopefully what we're playing. By the way, we can go into a whole bunch of stuff about that if people want to. I've been talking more and more. I've found more and more teachers. I've had students come to me from more and more teachers that have not allowed them to look at their hands while they play, which I find astonishing. We can dive into that if people want to. Looking at your hands while you play is an essential component of playing well, I think. So when we have some more information gathered because we've learned some of those things, like the chord shape and what it feels like, what fingers we're using, what it sounds like, the motion that the hand makes, we're gathering all of that as we practice at the piano, right? Even from a beginner level. Then we can say, okay, can I play in my mind bar 1 and bar maybe 1 through bar 3 of this piece? 1, 2, maybe 4 bars, because it would be in the 4th bar, the chord would change. And can I play those 4 bars just thinking about them? Can I imagine? You could even start to do this while you're at the piano so that you can like take a picture with your mind of what the keyboard looks like as it sits in front of you. When you close your eyes, can you still visualize the keyboard as it's in front of you? Start with that. If that's hard to do, then you can open them again and you get an immediate refresh of what it looks like. Then secondly, can we imagine, once we can see the keyboard in our mind, can we imagine our left hand going to the correct notes on the keyboard? And we see that. We see our opening hand position. And then we can imagine playing what we've spent time learning. But instead of actually physically doing it, our hands, if we're at the keyboard, our hands are in our lap, eyes probably closed. It helps you focus. Just trying to imagine all of that. Imagine what it looks like, what it feels like, what it sounds like as you play each note. But at a beginner level, we have to do that with things that we already know pretty well. So we can use that kind of practice to reinforce what we've been learning, but we're probably going to be nearing the end of learning a particular piece. So that can be like, it's like the icing on the cake. The more and more that you progress, the earlier you can use mental practice. And Nathaniel, you bring up a great question. See, I didn't hear from Sam. Did I? I don't think I heard from Sam. So we're not going to go back to his Debussy question unless he comes back. Nathaniel, you said you're doing some sight reading exercises of a couple measures. First, reading through it, counting, and hearing the notes in your head before actually playing. Is that kind of mental practice? Yes, absolutely. I also call it audiation or audiating, which is a term I think that was coined by Edwin Gordon. I think he was I think he created the term. But yes. And, Sam, wonderful. Great. Sam, can you drop your question in? Because I'd have to go searching through the chat to find it again. But I know you're asking about Clair de Lune. So can you drop in the bars that you want some help with? And we'll tackle that next. Yes, Nathaniel, that's also how I teach sight reading as well to students. Because until you get to the point in your development where you need to sit down and play an excerpt that is so long that you can't think about it ahead of time, that's pretty far down the road. I don't even think that would be a thing you'd have to do even at RCM level 9 and 10. I don't think you'd have to do anything like that. So yes, when I teach sight reading, I teach to look at the measures we're playing and start to visualize playing them as you see them on the page. And hopefully the sight reading that you're working on is an easy enough level that it's possible for you, because the movements and the motions needed and the information on the page is significantly less than you're used to looking at for the level of piece that you're currently working on. Yeah. Okay. Sam, I'm going to pull up. Okay, I'll pull that segment up and we'll have a quick talk about it. Webster. Webster, let me give you a couple things to think about, and then we'll jump to Sam's Clair de Lune, because we're going to take a bit longer talking about a piece of music. Webster, I'd say the first thing is, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of nervousness around performance is very common unless you do it all the time. And first is, don't let the anxiety about it rattle you in the first place. It's okay to feel that way. And if we embrace knowing that, hey, I'm anxious about it because I care about what I'm going to play tomorrow or later today, whenever the performance is coming up. If we reframe that a little bit, that can help us control a little bit better what those emotions are in the first place. But it's never going to go away. For the vast majority of people, that doesn't go away. Possibly the only time it might go away, and this is mostly in my own experience, there have been 2 moments in my life where I've been less anxious about performing. One moment, I had no anxiety about performing. And it was because I was playing my 3rd concert of the week. And it was the same program. Probably also helped that it was a winner's recital in a competition. So I was also boosted in confidence because I did well. But those three things, I attribute most of the lack of anxiety around the performance to having played 2 previous times that week in front of people. And when the third one came up, I was just really excited to get to perform, and it was amazing. And it was so much fun. I played Rhapsody in Blue, and it was just like, yay. It was so great. No nerves at all. And the second time it happened for me was a similar situation in that I had 4 different programs of music to play over the course of a month, but I gave 5 performances in 4 weeks. So one of the programs had a repeat. So it was a lot of different music. But despite most of the performances being different repertoire, the first one was very stressful. The second one, while different, was not as stressful as the first. The third one, again, while different, was not as stressful as the second. And so on and so on. And so the only times where, for me in my life, where that anxiety has gone away or close to gone away is when I have given so many back-to-back performances that the performing has become normalized. Yeah. Yeah, Webster, that's a great point. And the list B minor, wonderful stuff. By the way, Webster, if you want to send in your playing, I'd love to talk to you about it. I've played the list previously. Yeah, so Nathaniel said, so if it hurts, do it more often. I mean, let's frame that the right way. Yeah, it shouldn't physically hurt, but a little mental uncertainty and unknown, yeah, do it more often. That's why there's studio class in collegiate and conservatory programs. And that's also why you should just, preparing for a performance, I will play for others. I'll play for my wife. I'll play for friends. I will play for my phone. I'll play for my camera equipment that's around here. I'll do some mock recordings too, where I'll say, this is a performance. I get one time through the whole thing, and I'm going to practice doing that. That when I don't have an opportunity to play a lot in front of people, that helps. It doesn't get rid of the anxiety that you get when you walk out. The only thing I found that does that is just lots of performance. If you're not touring all the time, that doesn't happen. So every professor that I've talked to, when I've asked them a similar question, how do you deal with the anxiety around performance? And they have had careers performing, and maybe, at the point in their life that I'm talking with them, they might perform 4 times a year. They all say, we can't get rid of it. It just happens. And we've just had a more experience to learn how to deal with it a little bit better. Onto the dealing with it part, just real quick. You can do some breathing exercises. Just slow and calm breathing exercises backstage can be really, really helpful. Mental practice, like we just talked about, Webster, that can be really, really helpful. Do you have a pre-concert routine that you can go through that settles you? Mine, believe it or not, is actually playing some pop music before walking out on stage. So I'll do my warm-ups and I'll be in the hall doing some, and then I'll be in a green room. And the last thing I play before leaving the green room and getting ready to walk out in performance is a piece or two of simple music that I just love. Yeah, you said jazz improv. That's great. Yeah. So come up with a routine where it's like the same stuff. So I always will use 1 or 2 of the same pieces, and I'll just play them and hum along and enjoy music for being music. Because that centers me in why I'm performing in the first place. It's not anything to be nervous about. I'm just sharing my music with other people. So I'm going to take a minute and just forget about all of the complexity of what I have to play. I'm going to forget about who may or may not be in the audience. And I'm going to center myself just playing some fun, simple music. Because what I want the audience to feel is enjoyment or a journey, or I want them to come with me, and I don't want to be distracted. So, yeah, Webster, the green room is... My heart's coming up into my throat just thinking about it. Yeah. So those are my biggest tips for you, Webster. But yes, absolutely. You know, like, I would love to hear you play the Liszt Sonata. And if you want, you know, while you're working on it, if you don't have someone else that you're working with, or even if you do, if you've got a coach or a teacher, I'd love to take a listen to an excerpt. We probably can't listen to an entire performance on the stream, but like a movement of it based on one of the common dividers, you know, in that piece, that would be great. I'd love to, and I think everybody would love to hear you play too. So cool. Sam, jumping back to Clair de Lune. Calais, I would do the same stuff that we just talked about, especially just breathe. Just breathe, because you're going to be sitting in the audience waiting to go your turn, right? And you're going to hear a lot of other people play. Just breathe and think about what you're going to play, but don't start thinking about it too soon. You know, like the person who plays before you or two people before you, start to center yourself in what you're going to play. Do some of that mental practice from your seat, and then go ahead. Yeah. Webster, I agree with that. Yeah. Because music is a lifelong journey. Lifelong. There's always things that we can get another opinion on. So, yeah. Sam, measure. So, Debussy, measure 26, 27, the poco mosso. So, you're looking for just tips. Okay. Oh. Let's try this again. My score turned off. Woo, there it is. Okay. Okay, I think everybody knows this bit. Right. Sam, without seeing you play, do a little bit of focus on the underlying texture and pedaling it well, and feeling each of those. They're kind of like waves, right? And I'm talking, and listen to that huge change in color from beat one is just D flat is such a lovely harmony to begin with. F minor. Those aren't dramatically different, but the third beat, experience that and explore what that color, the tone color, feels like and how different it is. And do that without playing the melody. Same. Yeah. Then you can add in some melody, sure. I would take some time to do that. That's not a technical thing, but I think it's really important to explore, especially in a piece like this. There's so much magic within the harmony. So take some time and really come to understand what is truly going on there. Secondly, no matter what tempo you're playing and that you strive to play, really be sure the melody, and only the melody, is sitting on top of the rest of the texture. So if we go slowly, that C flat sitting way on top of everything, and then the D. And don't smack the last A flat of the bar. That happens far too often, where we get to the end, and it almost sounds like the melody goes ba-ba-bum. It's not that though, it's da-da-dum. One line. melody is just an eighth note. So take time to make sure that both the F flat and the A flat are significantly below the dynamic of your melody, below that phrase. And then continuing as you'd go on, yeah. Okay. Webster, I'm going to come back to your comment because that sounds interesting. But we'll stick with Sam for right now. Sam, do you have any technique questions? Is a technical thing slowing you down? Do you feel like it's slowing you down? Do you have fingerings written in for each of these measures so that we're always using the same one? I should mention one more thing. I should mention one more thing that I kind of glossed over. And that's that it's very easy playing these arpeggiations to think of them as big stretches in the hand. Especially because usually when we're playing a piece like this, we haven't studied a whole lot of etudes that are about keeping the hand relaxed. So let the fingers and the wrist, I'll say let the wrist carry the fingers where they need to go. So we're not trying to play like that. For me, it doesn't look like when I play an octave like I'm stretched, but we'd still want to just let the wrist follow through the motion. And then let's see, next page. So all through that, even if I'm playing it faster, the hand is always really relaxed. So letting the wrist lead us, right? And not playing with all of that tension. Same thing here. Okay. Sam, feel free to follow up with me about any of those, or if you're looking for any other particular tips. Without seeing you play, those are some of the biggest ones that come to my mind. And they kind of span the gamut. So some musical things, some tone things, phrasing, and then technique with the left hand, making sure we don't stay too stretched out. Yeah, we'll see if Sam has anything more to say. Webster, going back to your question. And by the way, I know that there may have been some questions way earlier today, and if I didn't get to them, please drop them in the chat now if you had one. We've got a bit more time today, so I'd love to answer a few more of those. So Webster, you said it's it's really we're going back to talking about the nerves. Something you can only learn to control more and more with performing experience. Even Argerich suffered severely from it. Yeah, Horowitz is said to have needed to be sometimes pushed out on stage because he didn't like performing. Sometimes his manager would have to go grab him out of the bathroom and physically push him out on stage. He loved music, but gosh, yeah, performing was a different story. Yeah. Nancy, you said there's an interview with Argerich in the New York Times this week. Yeah. And Webster, you said with all of them, once they're on stage, they love it. Probably to a degree, yeah. I've always found the first half of a recital program to be way more stressful than the second half. And so I'll end up enjoying the second half a lot more than the first half. Yeah. And I'd also agree with, let's see, what Nancy said from quoting Arkovich, that she dislikes being alone, so she plays with orchestra or piano, four hands a lot. You know, I usually think of playing with orchestra as almost as stressful as playing solo. But playing four hands or with a chamber group, I find much, much less stressful. So there's something interesting. Yeah. Oh, so Whitney, you had a question about trills. Yes. Either too slow or too tense. Okay. Whitney, first off, if you're looking at trilling with consecutive fingers like 2 and 3, like we had in the minute waltz, don't trill faster than you currently can. Don't try to trill faster than you currently can. And if that means comfortably going back and forth like this, that's great. The last thing we want to do is try to trill faster than our mechanism is capable of in the moment and have that turn into tension where we grab or tense or stretch out the fingers maybe. One of those bad forms of tension happens. And then we end up, for the sake of making it sound the way we want or think it's going to sound the way we want, we add in a bunch of tension to our practice. That can be really difficult to get rid of in trills later on. So as your playing gets more and more developed, if you practice trills too much, playing them faster but with tension, that's going to be a hard thing to undo later. So just don't go any faster than you can. Trills are also, I find them almost always easier if you can skip a finger. Even in the minute waltz, which most people play with 2 and 3, right? You could play it with 1 and 3, and then play the first note of the melody with the left hand, which is a really cool workaround. And so I think I look for opportunities where I can trill with by skipping a finger, because when we skip a finger, we can add a little more rotation to the trill, and we can make it really fast and have a lot of control while we need to use less finger articulation in general. Same thing with 2 and 4. 2 and 4 can also be great. You know, there's a whole... I would like to do a video about this at some point, but I've never played trills in the with Chopin fingering, which is a little bit of what I've read about, where there is alternating fingering. I believe like 2 4 3 4, 2 4 3 4, 2 4 3 4, or 1 3 2 3, 1 3 2 3, 1 3 2 3. There are some very famous pianists that have done that and do that. And that's not something that I've ever experimented with. But if you wanted to, Whitney, the whole premise underneath that is to prevent the tension that, again, comes from using the same 2 fingers repeatedly over and over and over again. And so if we throw an alteration in the middle of it, so in this case, I'm still using the same trill we had in the Chopin waltz. So let's say 1 3 2 3, 1 3 2 3, 1 3 2 3. That type of technique is not at all practiced for me, so I can do it somewhat slowly. But there are some pianists that can just whip through trills using that sort of technique. At some point, when I do practice it more, I'm going to do a video on it. But I'm, going to need to really learn that skill first. And that to say also, I have never found I needed to trill with an alternating fingering. So I don't think it's a have to for everybody. But I think, for example, for me, I can always find a trill that works between skipping a finger or just using a comfortable consecutive finger. I haven't ever had an issue with it. So it's not something I've needed an extra tool for, like that Chopin fingering. But if it works for you, then absolutely use it. Nancy, not switching fingers. The title is about not switching fingers. The video is about repeated same pitches. And the video is about learning why we switch fingers in some passages when we repeat notes. Yeah. Some of you know that, Scarlatti. We'd have to switch fingers, for example, in that. And I actually show Martha Argerich playing it in the video, switching fingers. But other things, another piece I show in that video is for release, the middle section. And scores are always written, the for release scores are always written to show changing finger and alternating fingering. And the video goes in depth about why that's good in some cases and not good in other cases. And that's the skill we really need to learn. Not every time that we have a repeated pitch do we change finger. And not every time that we have a repeated pitch do we not change finger. It's really context dependent. Yeah. Webster, the Liszt Sonata I've played maybe 5 or 6 times in public. It's been a while since I played it, but yeah. Is it Alley Pop? Beginner intermediate pieces to practice trills. You know, something that would work great for that would be like the Petzold Minuet in G and adding ornamentation to it. Let's see. Something like that, maybe. Right? Just playing it by ear. That could be something to do. And you could probably find an edition that has some ornamentation in it. And those would be quick trills, quick turns, usually just 3 notes, which I think would be awesome to get started with learning what that feels like to alternate fingers like that. And I would even continue to say Baroque music is some of the best to really work out turns and trills. And they're most of the time, even in the really advanced Baroque music, most of the time they're going to be shorter in length. So we get to practice that in shorter durations, you know, maybe a half a beat or a beat in length total. Sometimes maybe a measure long in, you know, the random occurrence in Bach that we might have that, rarely longer than that. And that can help prepare us for what we might get if we're playing a Mozart concerto. Now we have to trill with both hands a third apart for, I don't know, you know, 4 measures or 8 measures. Yeah, I would prepare that with Bach and other easier Baroque examples. So like the Petzold we talked about, there are some other very simple Scarlatti sonatas that, again, usually turns and trills aren't written in the score, but you could add them to certain pitches. And you might be able to find a teaching edition that has that. If you can't, you could always bring one in to a stream and we could talk about it. Let's see here. Webster, you have a question about the list. And Stace, you had a question about the Chopin Nocturne in C sharp. Oh, I think I know the measure you're asking about. Let's see. So Webster, I think I can answer that. Let me pull that music up. Webster, what bar are we talking about in the list? Of course, my score doesn't have measure numbers, so If you give me a general idea, I can probably find it. You say 33? 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. Let's see. I have a G sharp. No, I don't. That is F. Okay. Two, 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 two. That's what I've always played on the F. 2, 2, 2, 2. It's also marked marcato, which is my justification for that. So we're looking at this bar. So I use 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. It's all in one hand position. And because it's marcato, I feel like I can really hammer it home. And using one finger, 2 is, yeah, maybe you can see a little bit of this. 2 is, I usually use a little bit of a brace with the thumb, which is fine. If I alternated fingers on that, I would lose intensity. So I don't want to lose intensity. I want it to be super pronounced. I want it to really stick out and be even with or above everything the right hand is doing. So 2, 2, 2, 2. Yeah. And then that little gesture. That's the end of a slur. So it doesn't need to be, I don't need anything stronger than 4 or 5 through the 16ths there. Going back. Yeah. So. One, 1, 1. That would be my second choice. Yeah. For the same reason, I think 1, 1, 1 gives us that same ability to really strike those. It should be a pretty aggressive tone on that section. So I like that. And I think the reason I chose 2 is that a rotation back from the previous bar into that first pitch, my second finger was already there. So that just felt really natural for me. Thumb would be. Yeah, so that'd be my second choice. Let me go back to Stace's question. It is Stace or is it Stacy? I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Let's pull up that nocturne. Thank you. No why. Phew. Okay. So let's see. You're asking about the C sharp minor opus posthumous. And we're going to say this is our last question for today. And we'll wrap up after this one. So measure 58, which I'm sure is, 55, 6, 7, 8. Let's see. Up to the D sharp. Okay. And your particular question is practice techniques to speed up the right hand. Yes. Okay. The biggest way I love to tackle this is the same way I'd tackle speeding up scale technique. which is, right, whenever we're practicing something, there are easy moments and there are hard moments. For example, in this passage, the first 4 notes of the passage are really easy. They're really easy. It's 4 consecutive pitches, 4 consecutive fingers, right? The hard part is the thumb coming underneath. And then that technique has to repeat over and over again as we ascend. And then as we descend, the technique changes to a cross, right? But it's not the whole passage that's difficult. It's only the moments going from one finger to the thumb tuck or from the thumb back across the hand. And I'd argue the thumb tuck is more difficult than the ones coming back down where we cross over the thumb. So, in order to practice that, what I love to do is practice from one group. So I'm going to make groupings out of this bar. From the beginning to the next thumb. And I'm going to play that and get used to making that tuck of the thumb and the gesture the wrist needs to make. I'll show that in a second. But just focusing on the groupings first. We're creating a grouping to practice and then pause by going one note beyond the hardest point. Then we could take the thumb again and go one note beyond the hardest point. So that's the first grouping. The next grouping repeats the E. And if we just take those 2, we have a group of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 1. Okay, in a nutshell, that's what I would do. And I would do that all the way up and then all the way back down, creating groupings that cross the most difficult part of the passage, the thumb tuck. Then give yourself a chance to rest because we don't want any tension in the hand as we need to play the entire run up and down. So as we need to learn that, first we have to be able to do these small chunks and we have to be able to do them really easily and relaxed. So work on those small chunks, right? Keep going, etc., all the way to the top. You say you struggle on the way down, always messing up 3 and 4. So we do the same thing. Cross to the 3rd finger, cross 2, 4, 3, 4. Yeah, so it's the same principle, going one note beyond the cross of the hand. Okay, a few other tips that are useful for not just this passage, but all scale technique. If you allow the wrist to elevate a little bit, in this case it's elevated because we're on a black key, but if the wrist comes up a little bit and we do a tiny bit of rotation toward the right, our thumb is immediately closer to where it needs to go. And when we drop into the thumb, it's almost like a rotation back in the opposite direction. So we can apply that. A little wrist elevation, rotation, drop into the thumb. Same thing, a little rotation. That little bit of rotation, look at how far it brings the thumb from being here to being almost able to just drop into the note. Versus here where it all has to happen with a movement of the thumb under the hand. I still would practice that. I would practice not doing the rotation as well and doing it all with a thumb tuck because we want that thumb to be super, super flexible. So, and then do some rotation. And then you can also add some of the groupings together. So try doing an entire octave instead of dividing the octave into 2 groups. Do the second octave. And if that's too hard, if we can't go from just here to there, then just add one note at a time. So instead of going one note past, the hard point, go 2 notes past. Notice that all of these times I'm doing this, I'm not going slowly, because playing it slowly is not hard. I'm taking a tempo that for me is a challenge, so you'd have to find that tempo. If it's here, go to the highest tempo that you can play accurately. Don't go slower than that. And work one. Now we worked 1 note, work 2 notes beyond, work 3 notes beyond. And now we've linked 2 groups together. I think that's good. That's how I would approach that passage, and that's how I would also approach just getting all scales quicker in general. So, yeah, great question. Yes, noteworthy. Well, we're just about to wrap up, actually. That's great, Calais. That's great. Yes, 1 step at a time. Thanks, Whitney. Thank you so much for all for being here. If you didn't have a chance to give the video a thumbs up, please click the thumbs up button. It does actually help. It does actually make a difference. I swear to all of you, I'm working hard. Many of you know I've got a new course coming soon on practicing better practice techniques. It is coming soon. Yesterday, I wrote out 20 pages of... There are 20 documents, supplemental documents that go with the course. And I have another 15 to go. There's almost one supplemental document for almost one for every module of the course. So I'm in the middle of doing that. And I'm looking forward to sharing it with all of you very soon. But that is why there hasn't been a new video out here in a bit. But there will be more coming soon. And also, last but not least, April is one of our 5 Wednesday months of the year, which means I always do live streams the 2nd Wednesday and the 4th Wednesday of the month. That means our next stream is not in 2 weeks. That would be May 7th. But it's actually in 3 weeks, May 14th. So our next streams will be May 14th, May 28th. And yeah, thanks again to everybody for being here. Thanks for lots of great questions. Webster, that would be fun, a tone-based collab. That would be great. If you have anybody that you know, I'm Facebook friends with Ben Lottie, but he doesn't work for them anymore. But yeah, if you are a subscriber to Tonebase and you have any contacts with them, you should just tell them about me. That would be fun. Thanks, Webster, for great questions. And everybody else, for all the questions that came in today, thanks so much. We had a great stream. Lots of different stuff we chatted about. Remember, you can always send in playing, your own playing to these streams. Just follow the directions in the link in the description down below. Yeah, and I think that's it. Okay, yes, cheers. Have a great rest of your week. Practice hard. Don't over-practice. Keep your music fresh, interesting, and stay inspired. And I'll look forward to seeing all of you in 3 weeks. Noteworthy. Oh, can you send in an unlisted YouTube video? You know what? Try, Noteworthy. Try, and I'll see. The one thing that I really don't want to have happen is just to have ads play. So if an ad plays on an unlisted video, I can't show it. But if we don't have any ads play, then I could use that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you in 3 weeks. All right.